Hi and welcome to the predictions based on astrology for the week of January 6th, 2020. First, let's quickly recap just a few of the predictions that I made for the previous week. So as far as the stock market direction of the 4 trading days, I was correct on 3 days, and on Friday I thought that the market would go up, most likely on positive news about the agreements between China and US. However, we had this attack on Iran and the market got spooked and actually went down. So at the same time, the ongoing predictions that I had in place, for most of the previous year, as well as continuing into this year, especially in January, is that due to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, we may expect major geopolitical tensions and old powerful leaders stepping away or perhaps being violently removed. And indeed, of course, a important military person in Iran was killed in the strike. But at the same time, in the previous week, we had a few other important leaders basically either passing away, such as the ex-NBA commissioner David Stern, who led the league apparently for 3 decades. And he passed away at 77, not surprising, but I guess somebody who was in power for a long time. We also had news that I guess Taiwan's chief of general staff was killed in the helicopter crash. So that would be another manifestation. And as I said, and this I guess ties into prediction for this week, that this transit between Pluto and Saturn and Capricorn is still going to be in play. In fact, quite a bit so. Emphasized by the eclipse this week, and so we will continue experiencing sort of the heightened probability of important leaders passing away, like I said, dying just on natural causes or being violently removed. And that applies to sort of leaders of states, but also leaders of important, corporations, some corporations that have been in place for a long time, well known, and or leaders who themselves were in power for a long time. I also made a prediction for previous week that there would be some news about a male leader, most likely a male and or masculine leader, who would be potentially in the news, either the negative news about this person or whatever the events might be associated with this person, that they would be perceived negatively by the public, perhaps because the person would be perceived as somehow rigid, not, I guess, flexible enough, and or maybe they will be too conservative or too cold in some way, and or the person maybe just somehow, like this known, corporate leader of some sort, but whatever the news would be about them may be perceived negatively by the public. And we did see, there was news rather about this Carlos Ghosn, former chief of Nissan Motor Company, who had, I guess, unexpectedly fled Japan to Lebanon. And this person was being, I guess, or on trial or awaiting trial and accused of some financial wrongdoing. And interestingly, this occurred under Jupiter, which has to do with law and trials, as well as long-distance international travel, and Mercury, which has to do with cars, obviously, transportation, being in conjunction to North Node, which has to do with, again, being a public figure, public news, news that affect large numbers of people, and also negative sort of publicity. I also had predicted for previous week, for US specifically, that there may be some slightly negative news about either like workforce and or some negotiations that relate to sort of the service workers, sort of demands or requests for some sort of improvements in their, I guess, benefits, such as maybe healthcare, minimum wage, and that the deal, if there's a deal or negotiations along those lines, that may not be successful, at least perhaps because of the miscommunication or difference in values. And again, there's this Mercury that was in play last week near nodes, and Mercury obviously has to do with driving as well as communication, transportation in general. And there was news from the US that Uber technologists and delivery startup Postmates, they filed a lawsuit that sought or seeks currently to declare unconstitutional a California law that would force companies like that to consider their drivers full-time employees instead of contractors. So obviously this is a law that would maybe protect drivers more, and give them, more benefits, more security, I guess, of some sort. But again, we have this lawsuit, Jupiter, being filed to kind of not make that happen. And of course, ongoing prediction that I had, but I specifically emphasize how this will be escalating in January of 2020. I've made that prediction multiple times on my weekly blogs, as well as the annual predictions, starting even back with annual predictions in 2019, that there will be escalation of geopolitical tensions, and specifically 29th of December of 2019 through about mid-January 2020 is a particularly kind of a tense time, and time of when we have this new cycle beginning. And also we have a lunar eclipse coming up on the 10th of January, and this will be sort of a mini cycle, so to speak, lasting for about 6 months. But whatever is going to be occurring this week will be quite significant, like I said, both long term as well as short term. By short term, I mean about 6 months, and the events will be far reaching, affecting many people on the globe. And this had already started sort of last week, and we obviously had this escalation of events between US and Iran. So moving on to this week, and also I guess quickly mention, of course, this had led to increase in oil prices. I did make also global predictions, and that has been running in my blog weekly blog post as a future glance, as sort of a future developments, as well as under the long-term sort of prediction section. My blog is at tolstunka.com, and so there I specifically mentioned, and I do see in horoscopes of Iran and as well as Saudi Arabia some sort of tense aspect for Iran that will pick up in 2020 and then continue into 2021 and early 2022. And for both countries, Saudi Arabia and Iran, there are again some tense aspects coming up in 23, 25. And of course, in 25, 26, we will have Saturn and Neptune, which Neptune has to do with oil, conjunction. And typically this would coincide with some sort of a peak or low in oil prices. And with these tensions in the region, my thinking is that most likely it will be a peak in oil prices. So again, at that time, there may be some significant events related to oil to kind of resolve the tensions building up until that time. And there may be some other interesting developments related to Neptune, such as, related to chemicals, bio or weapons, etc. But that's sort of a separate topic. So moving on to this week, ongoing background influence will be quite strong this week. That is, Saturn and Pluto will be quite tightly conjunct. In fact, I think they're forming exact conjunction this week, so their energy will be very strong. Eclipse is occurring right there. We have Jupiter nearby and Sun, Moon, the nodes. So this will be a very tense week where we may hear about more sort of important events, potentially more leaders removed, more important long-reaching decisions. Pluto also has to do indeed with nuclear power, so hopefully no accidents, but yes, there may be other things like various disasters. Of course, we have bushfires in Australia, but this could also be an earthquake of sort of major proportions. And I did look quickly at the chart of Tokyo and Japan. They are affected both by transits this week and in general upcoming transits, so that is definitely one of the most earthquake-prone areas in the world. So, and their charts are affected, so that could be where this would be manifested. Additionally, there may be other, disasters along the lines of, and we already had some news, I guess, Of course, maybe those happen all the time, but like in India, there was a subway station that collapsed. But events that we may expect to hear sort of more of this week and in the upcoming 6 months following this eclipse are indeed intensification of like situations where again tunnel collapses, bridge collapses, some sort of a mine collapses, recycling plant experiences some problems, more news about nuclear plants, nuclear power, or some radiation, and of course some tensions globally may have to do obviously with US-China, US-Iran, but in general just this instability where basically the established status quo, the leaders who are in place will be challenged, their power will be challenged, or they just will voluntarily leave. I mentioned this also in my global predictions for 2020, is that also we have some transits coming up to the natal chart of the Queen of England, and again, she has been in power and ruling sort of monarch for many years, so there would be a power change there potentially. Let's see. And this week is definitely this week through mid, so I guess this week and next week are extremely important in that sense. And then also, of course, the US and China horoscopes are also affected, where there may be increased news about various partnerships, international agreements, and importance, for leaders of various, like either corporate or governmental entities. And there may be more, greater than average market moves. And for this week, for each specific day of the week, I pretty much predicted market being down on Monday. And I'm already recording this on Monday, the 6th. I did see that the market actually first went down about, like Dow Jones, I think, fell 200 points, but then recovered by the end of the day. So that hasn't quite, I guess, come true as far as the end of the day is concerned. But I do believe that market will go down overall, and especially Thursday and Friday look to be like very significant influence days. And even if the market doesn't go down, certainly I would expect there to be large moves. So as far as leaders, again, the influence continues where especially 6th through the 13th of January, you may see some important announcements about either male or masculine leaders, possibly a government official, corporate officer, somebody like that, somebody like serious, uptight, etc., or at least perceived as such due to their official sort of position. And the person could be also a professor, religious leader, lawyer, diplomat, or some sort of internationally known and well-educated person. And the announcement about that person may be either that they did something negative or what was done to them is perceived negatively, perhaps because either this person is perceived as somebody who is too cold, ruthless, not warm, not warm-hearted enough, doesn't care about women. Makes me think, of course, about Weinstein, perhaps the trial of Weinstein, but also could be because this person falls sick, maybe like they're really well-loved, like some sort of a coach or something has been for a long time, and then they fall sick or suffer an accident while traveling or training, or somebody's sentenced in the court, and again, either the sentence itself may be perceived as unjust, or that person themselves may be perceived as somebody who's kind of not liked by the public, and or this person is in the news because what they did is against the law or against some religious view. At the same time, 6th through 13th of January may see increased news about communication and transportation companies. So there may be some negotiations or projects kind of involving new, plans to travel somewhere or open new routes or something like that, new initiatives, new agreements. At the same time, there may be increased sort of governmental scrutiny of either these projects or where people can travel. So there may be upcoming new regulations, and those regulations may cause delays, perhaps due to extra checks, controls, etc. And specifically, the news kind of about new initiatives and these regulations may come up on between approximately January 6th through the 10th, and then on the 11th through the 13th of January, regarding the transportation communication, we may hear about serious disruptions, accidents, arguments, difficult negotiations, and or there may be stressful news that are bad for retail, sales and commerce, some sort of embargo, stalled shipments, hacked websites, increased governmental regulations. So things kind of may get slightly worse then. For US, Monday the 6th looks like a day of increased news and communications, either or by the leaders or about the leaders, in the context of international laws, relations, and various type of judgments. It could be that a leader is communicating more than usual, or their communication is in focus more than usual, and the topics may relate to either land, food industry, homeland security, banks, financial security, as well as protection of women and children. And that communication may be either criticized as perhaps it's not warm enough, I guess, it's too cold, too rational, and they're not really, they don't really care for women, children, or safety of, land, etc., but rather they care to serve governments and corporations. And so that communication that the leader puts out perhaps is not really being perceived as genuine. I'm not sure who that would fit. It does make me think of, Weinstein and being, sort of accused of basically, mistreating women. So that could be one manifestation. So then other noteworthy sort of events, as I mentioned, Thursday and Friday in particular, because of the moon eclipse and various strong transits, there will be most likely days of strong market moves. And also there's high probability of intense seismic activity, terrorist attacks, removal, potentially violent removal of important leaders, various disasters, accidents, explosions, protests, violence, etc. And in particular, there may be important public event, and again, something that touches many people, either because people just are really aware of the situation, maybe through news, or literally many people are present at the time of this event happening. And this could be something that has really large repercussions worldwide, and it could be, again, from the short of 6 months sort of a period to a cycle that may last like 37 years, or something that's going to be on and on ongoing, kind of will lead to changes that are on a large scale for a long time. And let's see. So like I said, because of this eclipse, there will be some sort of follow-up events in the upcoming months, and in particular early, I guess, one would want to note period of about February 25th through the end of March and even into early April. So at that time, some transits will be kind of coming back, and I think also with Mars, which will add intensity. So, whatever is happening this week, especially Thursday, Friday, we may hear about it kind of coming back with a vengeance, or retaliation, or like say if fire is put out right this week, it may come back end of February through early April if there is some sort of a catastrophe or accident, explosion, anything to do with, kind of a maybe accident from somebody training, some, fighter suffers some injury, etc. And then they want to come back. So things may kind of, again, reverberate, or some similar event may come back end of February through early April, or if there's an earthquake, maybe a follow-up kind of to that at that time. And in general, March 22nd through 31st, as I already posted on my blog at lesenka.com, it had been running there for some time, this prediction, but just to bring it up here, there is again going to be a period where we can expect intensification of various, seismic activity, earthquakes, mudslides, volcano eruptions, building may collapse, accidents, explosions, attacks, protests, fires, and basically other problems, and they may involve places that are underground, involve kind of being surrounded, by rocks, again, building collapsing on people, some explosion or recycling plant or nuclear power plants or some storage facility that's underground, tunnel, etc. And also it may affect airspace, electricity, power supply, IT, telecoms, and networks, some sort of spying, hacking kind of a situation, and of course increased geopolitical tension and military threats and posturing and attacks. So that kind of tensions and violence may increase. Cyber attacks are quite likely, especially around March 22nd, and those may be followed by more attacks, and particularly problems may affect airplanes, drones, involve any space, related objects, or like flying rockets, etc., and or networks or other grids going down, either cloud providers suffering some outages or power grids going down, especially at the end of March. And this also would be a time at that, in late February through early April, where again we may have this new wave of either leaders being removed, dying, or stepping away for one reason or another. So that concludes, like I said, an important week definitely in your own life, especially if you're born in signs of like Capricorn, Cancer, Libra, and or Aries. Pay attention to what happens, especially if your birthday is around 9th and or 10th, plus minus a few days, January, and or sort of the other three signs that I mentioned, and see what happens around that time, because chances are in your own life you will also see this reverberation come late February through early April, and things may repeat again. So you may want to be prepared basically, and try to basically be physically as safe as possible, because people may be more prone to like breaking bones or falling off of sort of heights, and or like I said, buildings, bridges, anything that's like looks like a ruin. If you're going to like hike somewhere and or go somewhere where it's not like stable to walk on something, I would say maybe give it a break and not go there, and don't do this week. So that's about it. And other than that, I'm sure you will be fine. So come back and see me next week. Hopefully you'll be safe and enjoy your wonderful weekend. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.